also had to remember that we had an officer who had been terribly hurt in the line of duty and ultimately had to retire from the job that he loved. He lost his health care benefits for he and his family, despite he continued to suffer from the consequences of his injury. Again, we were able, Jason McKissick is his name, we were able, in his honor, be able to make that happen, that a law enforcement officer injured in the line of duty and unable to perform duties in the future can get continued health care benefits. This was not a divisive issue. This was not Republicans versus Democrats. Actually, in Olympia, Senator Sheldon and I will tell you, there is less controversy between Republicans and Democrats than there is between the House and the Senate. But the fact of the matter is, fair statement? So when I say we united Republicans and Democrats, that pales in comparison to the fact that we united the House and the Senate to get done what needed to be done for the law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders of the state of Washington. So a difficult year, 70 years, and let it make it never happen again. But to those families of law enforcement officers, the people of the state of Washington stand behind them. To our officers and to our firefighters and to our first responders, the people of the state of Washington, thank you, honor you, respect you, and want you to know we're there for you and we're there for your families. Ralph Monroe goes everywhere I go. Now you can't deny that, Ralph. And he said, before we get to Q&A this morning, you might as well understand I'm going to ask you a question. So to anticipate Ralph's question, I want to talk about something that Ralph and I have worked on. Because I think it's important when we talk about kids and fighting crime. When the tragedy happened in Columbine, you may recall that one of the problems for the first responders when they arrived is one, they couldn't communicate with each other, and they were from multiple jurisdictions. And two, even when they could communicate and they were told that the offenders were in the cafeteria, no one knew where the cafeteria was. So it was a little help to be told where they were. Out of that, we in the state of Washington, leading the entire country, said, you know what, the first responders going to a school ought to know the entire layout of that school. I was just asked to speak to the National Association of Attorneys General, and I can tell you we are the only, that I know of, state in the nation where we have now, and it's been done in a partnership with our law enforcement, mapped every school in the state of Washington onto our community and technical colleges and now onto our four-year universities to assist our law enforcement when they respond so that they know exactly when they're told the offender is in a given location where that is and can respond immediately. So I'm very proud, and I thank you, Ralph, for the help that you've given me to make that possible, and I think it's the right thing.
Thank you for mentioning. This casino is also, interesting enough, the first casino in America to be that.
There you go.
Squanchans have been way ahead of every other tribe in doing that.
There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about the economy and where we are, I assume, Sheriff. Let me just tell you very straightforwardly. My Council of Economic Advisors met a week ago, and we have some very good signs about economic recovery. The good signs are things that ultimately will see us out. For example, if you go to the Port of Seattle today, we will tell you May, the exports were up 40%. Most dramatic increase they've ever had. The foundation for us to come out of this economic recession is our import-export market. We're seeing growth in jobs. But first 5 months of last year, dramatic decline, almost 75,000. First 5 months of this year, an increase of almost 20,000. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is, it is going to be long, and it is going to be hard. We are not going to pull out of this recession vertically. We are going to pull out of it fairly flat, and along the way, there are going to be bumps in the road. For example, everybody thought that finally housing had turned around, and then we got the news that housing's down again. So we've got to put our seatbelts on because it's going to be tough. There's just no question about it. We got our forecast here a week ago for the state. And the senator, myself, and his colleagues When we return to Olympia in January, we'll be met with yet another $3 billion hole in the state budget. We have a budget of $32 billion overall, and over the last 2 years, we've had to fill a $12 billion gap in a $32 billion budget. And now we're going back in January, and we will have another $3 billion hole. The reason for that is because while we're seeing good signs in the private sector, the public sector revenues always lag behind. So we're not going to see ourselves really starting to recover at the state level, probably until the end, midway through the next biennium. So the challenge is on yet again. Now, we closed that $12 billion gap with cuts, $5.1 billion. That's 40% of the gap. And we raised some revenue, and that is about 70% of the gap. We did that upon the advice of every economist in the nation who said, whatever you do, do not do an all-cuts budget at the state level. Because if you do, you can end up in a double-dip recession. Because when people get laid off, who do they come to? They come to the state. They apply for unemployment. If they can't qualify for unemployment, they apply for welfare. They apply for Medicaid. They apply for food stamps. They need training or retraining, all of which costs the state more at a time when our revenues are plummeting. So the advice was do something balanced. So what we tried to do is balance it, but balance it with the predominance being in cuts. So $5.1 billion in cuts, and that's about 40% of the gap and 7% in new revenue.